Today's episode is an interview with Mike Lenz. He's a pharmacist, voice actor, and podcast host. Mike is someone I look up to, and I have the pleasure of calling him a friend. Mike and I know one another from the voiceover industry, and he uses his voice to entertain. You're listening to the Pharmacist Voice Podcast, a journey-style podcast about my career change from pharmacist to voice actor. I'm your host, Kim Newlove. I alternate solo shows and interview shows. The solo shows are about my career change, and the interview shows feature a variety of people who use their voices to advocate, educate, or entertain. I specialize in medical narration and e-learning. If you have a project in mind, contact me through my website, thepharmacistvoice.com. Thank you for joining me for episode 41. I'll tell you a little more about my guest, then we'll dive right into our interview. Mike Lenz is a full-time SAG-AFTRA professional voice talent, actor, audiobook narrator, and podcast producer. As a voice actor for more than 15 years, Mike has worked with clients such as Xerox, Hershey, Dell, Microsoft, Bayer, Coca-Cola, and many more on commercials, e-learning projects, real estate videos, corporate and web-based videos, and brand imaging. Mike has also appeared in regional and national television commercials as an on-camera talent, and he was the host of a local TV talk show in Saratoga Springs, New York for a number of years. Mike is also an accomplished audiobook narrator with more than 100 titles narrated to date. With titles in genres ranging from fiction, entertainment, science, and children's to Christian, business, self-help, and history, Mike loves bringing nonfiction and fiction stories to life with his engaging, confident, and trustworthy voice. Mike is also a Voice Arts Award-nominated podcast producer of a popular voiceover podcast and the creator of Podcast Snap, a podcast consulting service helping his clients with every step of their podcast creation and production. Mike is the author of Paid to Talk, A Journey into Voice Acting, and is a frequent speaker at learning and voiceover conferences. He currently lives in Saratoga Springs, New York with his wife and 4 children. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Mike Lenz. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice Podcast, Mike. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you doing, Kim?
I'm great. It's wonderful catching up with you today. So glad you could be here on the podcast.
I am so glad finally we were able to get together and chat on your podcast. I know you and I were talking about it back when you were thinking about starting it, and so excited for you, and it's just great to be here.
Well, Mike, I know you are kind of, to me, the original pharmacist who had a journey from pharmacist to voice actor. I would love it so much if you could tell my audience your journey.
I know. I remember when we connected, our mutual coach, Sean, connected us, and we're like, wait a minute, there's more of us out there. It's kind of cool. And we subsequently, I know you and I I've met other people that are also pharmacists who have become voice actors. So it's not as uncommon as I originally thought. But my journey started a while back. I've been doing VO for about 15 years, but 15 years ago, my life looked a lot different than it did now. I had run the pharmacy that had been in my family since 1960. So we own the building in this town where we live, and the little pharmacy on the corner, and it's been there literally since like 1872, I think, when the building was built. Always been a pharmacy, and as I said, in my family since 1960. So when I got out of school, I went to work in the family pharmacy, and I always had other things that I wanted to do, other interests. One of them, way back when, was politics, and I got involved in local politics and ended up serving on the city council as finance commissioner and as mayor of my hometown of Saratoga Springs up here in New York. And I enjoyed that. It was a great experience, but it was rough. I was literally like running a city, running the pharmacy. My wife and I had gotten married. We were having children. We were building our first home. It was just all these things of life. And you don't realize when you're in the midst of it how pressure-packed it is until you get out. And that moment of getting out happened when I actually lost my reelection bid for mayor. And it was a crazy time where, all the candidates or all the people in my political party were kind of swept out of office at the time. and I was kind of swept out with the wave of this election. And and looking back on it, I remember that my overwhelming feeling at the time was that I was relieved, because all of a sudden I had this decision made for me, and I was able to have now some more time to spend with my family and my business, and this creative side of me that had always kind of been bubbling under the surface started to bubble up. And I started to explore this creative side of myself. And I think everybody has a creative side to them. I really believe that. But I had kind of kept it tapped down, and I started exploring screenwriting, which I was fascinated in. I love movies, and had started exploring that kind of on an amateur level, had a little bit of success there, and joined a local filmmakers group. And I was at this meeting, and somebody was handing out flyers for a voice training company. And I remember thinking to myself, like the light bulb went on over the head, like bing. I'm like, wait a minute. One of the things I really loved about being mayor and enjoyed and missed, that was really the only thing I missed, was using my voice to communicate. I loved talking to groups, being on radio, television. I really enjoyed that communication piece. And I didn't have that in my life at that point in time. So I thought, wait a minute, I can use my voice to communicate. I don't have to run for office again. I might get paid to do it. And I'm like, I'm going to look into this. And as soon as I took my first session, my first coaching session, I was hooked, and I knew I wanted to do this. And that began the journey. And then over the 15 years, it really evolved from a hobby to a kind of a side hustle, and then a legitimate part-time job where I was really managing a lot of different clients, fortunately, and things were happening. And I got to the point about 3.5 years ago where I kind of made the decision. I'd been doing pharmacy for almost 30 years at the time, and I had built up enough of a client base and work that I felt relatively comfortable in making that switch. And so I made the decision to sell the pharmacy. And a wonderful young lady and her husband bought the pharmacy, and it was always her dream to own a compounding pharmacy. Our pharmacy had evolved into a compounding pharmacy by that point. And we own the building. She pays me rent. She's carrying on the tradition. And I was able to go and explore this world of VO. And fortunately, 2.5 years later, I'm able to do it full time. And, the old adage that what you pay attention to grows has fortunately been the case in my case. So I get up every day and come down to my studio and record. And I absolutely love it.
Awesome. That's so cool. Now, it sounds like at one point you were able to make the switch from part-time side hustle to full-time voice actor. I think I missed it. How long did that take you?
It was about the whole process from the time that I first got involved in VO to now has been about 15 years. But I always tell people that I started my podcast, VO podcast, about 5.5, almost 6 years ago now. And it was then that I really started to pay attention to it, because I started interviewing other people in the VO industry. And I started to discover that there were other people out there doing it on a full-time basis. And I started to realize that, I might be able to make this a full-time job. And that's when I really started to pay attention. So even though I say I've been doing it for 15 years, it's really been about the last 5 years that I've really been pursuing it in earnest. And it got to the point where I was able to do it full time.
Very good. And since you brought up your podcast, what's it called? Where can we find it?
Yeah, it's colloquially called the Mike Lenz VO podcast. It's actually Mike Lenz Voice: A Journey into Voice Acting, which tells you how little I knew about podcasting way back when. Long, cumbersome name. But you can find everything over at my website, which is miclensvoice.com. I do have a podcast page, miclensvopodcast.com. And because most people now who are on the podcast say, "Oh, I'm on the Mike Lenz VO podcast." So that's what it should be called, but officially it's Mike Lenz Voice: A Journey into Voice Acting. And we've had, I think I'm up to around, 118, maybe 119 guests. And it's been so much fun. So much fun.
You've had some of the greatest in the business on your podcast. What's that like, interviewing the greats?
Oh my
And
God.
who are some of them?
I know. I remember when I started, and you and I talked about this before we started recording. I started with zero guests, right? I had an idea, that I wanted to share my journey with other people. And I wanted to create a podcast that was me 15 years ago. Somebody who was new to the voiceover industry, but really didn't know where to start. And I'm like, what better way to help people than to talk to other people that are in the industry about their journey? And so that's what I did. And it's based around basically three questions. One, what's your journey about? Number two, what are some obstacles you've overcome and what lessons did you learn? And then asking them to give a one piece of advice to an aspiring voice actor at the end. So everybody gets at least one golden nugget with each episode. But I remember, I'm thinking to myself, who are some of the really good people? So Harlan Hogan came to mind, Rodney Salisbury, who I'd met once at a conference years and years ago, and Tom Deere. And I asked those three to be on. I remember sending a cold email to Rodney Salisbury. And those of you listening probably don't know who Rodney is, but Rodney is so well known in the VO world, an icon really. And I emailed him and I said, "You don't know me. I'm starting a podcast. I don't even have one yet. I'm starting one, and I would love to interview you." It was longer than that, but I was very formal and kind, and said a prayer and hit send, and that was like 3:00 in the afternoon. And at 6:00, I came home from work, and my wife's in the bathroom. We've got little kids running around the house. And she's like, "Okay, Dad's home. I'm off duty." And all of a sudden the phone rings. I wouldn't, answer a phone where I didn't know the number, but it said Beverly Hills, California. And I'm like, no. So I clicked. I go, "Hello, it's Mike. Hello, this is Rodney Salisbury. Is Mike there?" And I'm like, I pulled the phone away and I'm like, "Ah." And I'm like, "Hi, Rodney, this is Mike. How can I help you?" And well, I got your email. He ends up talking to me about, I had self-published a small ebook about VO, about the VO industry and my journey. He goes, "I want to talk to you about, I noticed that you self-published a book and I want to find out more about that." And we end up spending like an hour to an hour and a half on the phone talking about all kinds of stuff. And he goes, "Of course I'm going to come on your podcast." And as it turned out, he and I would reach out to each other like, once a month, and just to talk about stuff. I ended up helping him launch his podcast. And he's
Awesome.
become not only a mentor, but a friend of mine, all because of this cold email that I sent. So just send it. You know what I mean? If you think there's somebody out there that you think you can't get them, or you're afraid to ask them, just ask, because you never know. You never know. And I'm living proof of that.
Absolutely. I have listened to your podcast. I didn't know about it until I got into my journey a little bit. And then you and I talked in the summer last year, got to know each other. Then I find out we have so many similarities. I don't know if it's just the Pharmacist connection or not, but I have really enjoyed the connection, and even just listening to your advice on your podcast. It's been awesome. One of the similarities that we've had was our nonfiction audiobook narration coach, Sean Pratt. When did you start with him?
Sean jokes that I am amongst his longest running students. I finally graduated from his course. I think he and I were working together for at least 5 years.
Wow.
At least. It took me 5 years to get through like 12 modules. When he started, he didn't even have 12 modules, and he kept adding them on, so I just kept on training with him.
Yeah.
But he was so instrumental in, I do a lot of audiobooks now, and I love doing them, and I'm so thankful that it's a big part of what I do. And I definitely give credit to Sean, because Sean has helped me every step of the way. Great guy, and I know he's helped you as well. You recently graduated as well. Didn't take you
Yes.
quite as long.
No, I went straight through. I think it took me 14 months. Not
Yeah.
judging. I swear to you.
It's okay. It's okay. At different times, but it was fun.
Yes, yes. You had a good experience. I had a good experience. If anyone out there wants to become an audiobook narrator and is interested in nonfiction, check out SeanPrattPresents.com. Sean Pratt is a fantastic coach. What I saw on LinkedIn was the announcement of your graduation from Sean's program. And then I don't know if it was even a week, then I graduated.
I
and
know.
I thought, man, I should have worked harder. I could have beat Mike.
I know. We didn't know we were that close. I mean,
I had no idea.
It literally was like a week later. You might have graduated before me. He might not have posted it until after. So you might go check with Sean. Maybe you beat me.
I graduated September 2nd, but he didn't post it until later. What was your date?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
You were probably August.
I think it was September 1st. Yep, that was it. Yep, I think so. Yeah, you
Oh,
were
that
September 2nd?
hurts. It was
I think it was just
September
one day
2nd.
before. I'm pretty sure. I'll go confirm that, but let's go with that.
It's not a race, but I thought that was kind of cool that we graduated
I think
around
it
the
was
same
too.
time.
I think it was too. Absolutely.
Yeah, 2 pharmacists graduating at the same time. Why not?
Why not? Of
Why
course.
not? Yeah, that's great. Now, I understand that you have quite a few titles under your belt as an audiobook narrator. What's your experience been? What was your first, and how many have you got now?
I remember getting my very first audiobook, and I was through the moon. I was at the pharmacy, and my wife emailed me. She was, I think you might have gotten offered an audiobook. And I ran back to the computer and I looked it up, and lo and behold, I'd gotten offered a royalty share book. It was 13 hours, finished
Oh,
hours.
wow.
And for those that don't know, it usually takes you anywhere from 5 to 6 hours of post-production work, editing and so forth, for every finished hour. So, I was up against a 60 plus hours worth of work, and I had no idea what I was doing. And it was absolutely a trial by fire. And I fortunately had a good friend of mine who lived locally, who was an audio engineer and was also an aspiring voice actor. He goes, "I'll record you and I'll edit it for you. We'll do a team and we'll split the royalty share." And I'm like, absolutely. I'm like, I'm off to the races. This is awesome. I'm on my way. And I ended up doing 5 royalty share titles with Margie through ACX, and that was how I got started. And with the books that I have under contract, I will be over 100 by within a month. So it's been a great journey. When I started with Sean, I think I maybe had 5 or 6 books under my belt, and then when I went full time, I had maybe 15. So I had been doing very few. But again, what you pay attention to typically grows. So I really wanted to make that a big part of what I did as a full time voice actor, and fortunately, I've been able to get work with some major publishers and different companies, and so I have consistent work and booked out a couple of months at any given time. So when I get up in the morning, I come down to the studio and I thank God that I have this job, and literally thank God, and go to work. And I'm just very, very blessed to be able to do this every single day.
Congratulations on all your success. That's so great. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How'd you find that first book that you wanted to narrate? How'd you get that first job? And it sounds like you're connected to a lot of different publishers at this point. How'd you get connected with them? Sounds like it's really changed over time.
It has. It has. ACX, which is Audiobook Creation Exchange, which is a subsidiary of Amazon, which is a subsidiary, or Audible, which is a subsidiary of Amazon. They have this great site where you can go and create a free profile, and you can audition for titles. So you get to go in and pick. You can pick it by genre, by how much they'll pay, by language, all different kinds of categories. And I knew that, my science background would help me. So this was a scientific book. It was about the environment, called Green Intelligence. Don't go look it up. Don't listen to it, because nobody wants you to listen to their first audiobook. Listen to my most recent audiobooks for sure, but not the first one. But the first one was Green Intelligence. And that's kind of what I gravitated towards, the nonfiction science-based books. And that's where I started. And it's just been an evolution. I've developed relationships with different publishers. Pretty much all the work that I've ever gotten in the VO industry has been through referrals. And I talk about this on my upcoming podcast episode about this complex system that we really are in as voice actors. It's really networked. It's really important, as you and I both know, to network, make sure that we are developing relationships with people within the industry. And fortunately, through those relationships, I've been referred to different publishers and publishing companies, and was fortunate to get picked up by Tantor Recorded Books, which has Tantor, Gildan, Highbridge, um, and do a lot of work with them. And then there's other companies like Two Words Publishing, which is a Christian publishing company, that I've developed relationship with, and other companies. And then I have some other um, companies that do audio course books for college courses that don't show up on Audible. You won't see them on Audible because they're part of the curriculum for this college, these online colleges. So, and that's been a consistent area of work for me over the years as well. So it's every single one has been based on either somebody referred me or I had developed that relationship myself and developed those contacts, and somebody referred me to somebody else who referred me to somebody else. So I tell everybody who's trying to get into the VO industry that the most important thing is understanding whether or not you really want to do this and spending time being a fly on the wall within the industry and through social media to figure out whether this is an area that you think you'd like to explore, and then develop those relationships. And that's true, I think, in most areas of life and business, is that success comes from relationships. And I think the VO industry is no different.
Tell me about going to conferences. Has anything from a conference ever changed your life with audiobooks or with VO in general?
Well, for audiobooks, for sure. I went to FAFCon a few years ago, which was a great experience. That's a VO conference, and that was just all of your peers coming together in an unconference. So there was no. We created the whole curriculum in terms of what was offered. So we literally wrote on little cards and put them up on a board, and then people would decide whether they want to. Enough people wanted to come to hear you talk about whatever topic you put up, then guess what? You were presenting like the next day. And it was so organic and amazing, and just being able to communicate with peers. So there's that piece, which I think is really important, is to that whole networking, connecting with people. And when I went to APAC last year, well, a little more than a year now, in New York City, that's the Audiobook Publishers Association conference. That was the first one I'd been to. And I almost didn't go because I had several trips that I had to go on for different things, for some podcasting work. And we had gone to visit our daughter who was abroad. So it was back in May, and it was a very busy month. And this was at the end of May. And I actually contemplated possibly not going. And I'm
Hmm.
like, you know what? No, Mike, you paid, you got to go. So I went down to New York, and stayed over and went down alone by myself. My family stayed home. And, and that's what a lot of times, when you go to these conferences, you typically want to be with somebody who and somebody gave me advice early on, which is don't do that, because they'll be your security blanket and you'll just cling to them. You got to go. You got to put yourself out there and force yourself to have to meet new people. And there's like 600 people in the lunchroom eating. And I walk in, we left one of the presentations, and I was with a friend of mine who was a fellow VO who had met at FAFCon. And he's like, come on, let's go eat. So I'm sitting down eating lunch. And I'm not sure if I told anybody this story, so this will be cool, kind of neat. I'm eating lunch, and the goal is, when you get to these conferences, is you want to meet the publishers. They're there, and you really want to connect with them so that they can meet you and know who you are, make that face-to-face connection. And one of the companies that I always wanted to work for when I first started in VO and audiobooks in particular was Tantor. I don't know why. I just always admired Tantor. They're one of the big publishing companies in the audiobook world. And I'd sent them a couple of cold emails and hadn't heard anything back. So I'm sitting having lunch, and my friend stands up to say hi to this person. And I'm just letting them talk, and I don't want to bother them. So I'm continuing to eat. And then somebody else comes over to talk to them. And I'm like, okay, now it's going to be rude if I don't stand up. Right. So now that there's a group behind me, so I wipe myself, and I wipe my mouth, and I get up and I turn around, and I'm talking to the casting director for Tantor,
Oh,
who's
cool.
standing right behind me in the sea of 600 people. And I
Wow.
go, and my friend introduces me. And she looks at my tag and she goes, oh, Saratoga Springs. I grew up in Canton, New York. That's like north of you. And I'm like, oh yeah, I used to be a mayor of Saratoga Springs. Oh my gosh, because that people remember that, right? They're like, oh, that's something, the memory tag. And she says, wait a minute, Mike Lenz, did you email me recently? I'm like, I might have emailed you about a month ago. She goes, I'm so sorry. I've been so busy. Here's my card. Give me one of your cards. She goes, please give me a couple of weeks to get myself, dug out of this conference, and send me an email in 2 weeks. So I sent her an email 2 weeks later. And about a week after that, she said, send me some files so we can have our engineers check them. I did. And about a week after that, I got an email saying, we have a book we'd like you to do. And
Yay.
that was one of the, our 22-year-old daughter just got a first job out of college in marketing with a marketing firm in New York City. And she was so excited when I was with her when she got the call that she got the job. And I said, I know what that feels like, because I remember getting that first book with Tantor, which had been one of my goals. I'd literally written it down as a goal that I wanted to accomplish. And to have gotten that book was just, you know, one of those kind of needle in a haystack moments where, I couldn't have figured it out myself, right? I couldn't have mapped that out. But it all comes back to relationships, because I'd met my friend at FAFCon. We'd stayed in contact. I'd actually referred him for some work, and he had referred me for some work. So when I saw him at the conference, it was a natural thing for us to go have lunch together, and it worked out. So the conferences are huge, and from both a peer perspective and also from a perspective of really getting in front of the people that might be able to hire you. It's just a great experience. I know in the COVID world, it's a little harder now, but conferences had a big impact on my career for sure.
Good for you. Would you say that your audiobook career has really snowballed since then, or has it just gradually increased?
No, it was a pretty dramatic increase at that point. And then I had the opportunity to go again, an audiobook publishers association event called speed dating, and where they put you in a room with like 16 different publishing companies, and you have 4 minutes to talk to them. And myself and I think 15 other audiobook narrators got selected via a lottery to go down to New York on March 2nd. And we were the last group that got to go to New York before COVID hit. And so on the 2nd, I went down there and was able to sit down and meet other publishers, which has led to other work with other publishing companies. And then, of course, on the 3rd, we heard on the news the first case in New York, and on the 13th, New York State shut down. So for us, all of us in our little group, we have a little Facebook or a messenger group, chat group, and we're all just so thankful that we were we got in under the wire, in terms of actually being able to physically go and meet with these publishers. So that was once that conference happened, that conference really was a tipping point for me. And I know a lot of other people attribute their success to APAC from the audiobook publishers world, because of those relationships you can develop with the people that will hire you. But since that conference, it really has started to been a more significant increase in the number of titles that I've been able to book, which has been great.
Awesome. That's a great story with a happy ending. Plus, I think that gives me a little bit of an idea. What do you think?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, like I said before, I keep kind of harping on this whole relationships and networks, but I think it's so critically important in all areas of business and life that I don't know that people take full advantage of. I'm not sure that people really understand the importance of what that means. Um, the importance is that it has to be a kind of a give first mentality. So you have, I just did an audiobook where he actually has a philosophy. It's called hashtag give first. And his point is that, look, if somebody wants to meet with him, somebody wants to talk with him, he's willing to meet with them and talk with them if he can, as long as he doesn't interfere with what he's currently doing. And inevitably that has led to him to develop really amazing relationships and get involved in startup companies in the area that he's involved in. And that makes a lot of sense because, you know, I've been in positions where I've had friends refer me, and we've talked about how it's just as much fun, if not more fun, when you get to refer your friend for a job and they get the job, as it is to get a job yourself. And the voiceover industry is unique in the acting world, at least, where it really is a fairly giving community. So
Yes.
we're not necessarily competing against other people. We're really competing against ourselves. If a producer is going to choose us, it doesn't mean that they like me less because they picked some other male voice actor. It's just that were what they were looking for, right? So it's not a direct competition with other people. So even within genres that you would be more inclined to be cast along with maybe somebody else who might be similar to you, even in those situations, I'm always referring friends and colleagues, both male and female, for jobs and projects and work, because inevitably, when you give, you receive, and you don't give to receive, but it's sort of inevitable. At least in my experience, that when you give, you receive, and the old adage, "What goes around comes around." So be nice to people, help people out, and typically they're going to help you out as well.
It's all about making the client happy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but you and I are a perfect example. You and I got connected through Sean, and, we've talked over the years and we communicate back and forth, and that we have a friendship, we have a relationship as fellow voice actors, and that's real, it's authentic. And that's the other thing that I think is really important, is that it has to be authentic. It can't just be, I'm just reaching out to this person just because I want to try to get on their radar. People can see that a mile away. But when you and I connected, it was real, it was authentic. I knew you were coaching with Sean, and we both were pharmacists, and it made sense, and we're like, okay, let's get together and chat. And that's what it's all about.
And as I go through my VO career, if I meet somebody and they find out I'm a pharmacist, they make sure to mention you, just so you know.
That's funny.
The community wants us to be connected, and
They do. I know.
we are. And hey, mission accomplished, people.
I think we need to create a pharmacist voiceover group and see how many people can be in there. Because I know there's her name slips me now.
Dana
Yes.
Hurley.
So there's you, me, and Dana that I know of, and I know there's got to be more. There have to be.
There are some, yes. And some of them are one-hit wonders where they've done something and they liked it. They just are not like you, where they've found that where they can leave the full-time pharmacy practice and then move over to the full-time VO.
Yeah.
It's a leap, and there's some training involved, and yeah, it's not really for the faint-hearted, is it?
No, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead with your story. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I remember a good friend of ours who happens to be a priest, and he came in the pharmacy and we were talking about it. And, he said, you do have to have a certain element of faith involved in it. And you kind of, you sort of figure out the first step as best you can. And then the next step usually becomes clearer. And he referenced that Indiana Jones movie where he's up against, he has to cross over the chasm, and
Yes.
he has his foot out, and he's like, I got to take the step. And as soon as he took the first step, all of a sudden his vision changed, and he could see the path, but it was impossible to see until he took the first step. And I'm like, that's a really, really good point. And I kind of knew that I at least knew the first step. And I just had to have the faith that once I took the first step, that the next step would present itself. And then I always tell people, don't underestimate the power of serendipity. Sometimes you got to get in the boat. And even if you think, you want to get to the other side of the lake or wherever you are, and you think, I want to go there, then more often than not, rather than trying to row against the current or the wind, just get in the boat. A good friend of mine who's a consultant told me that before I went full time. He goes, somebody gave him this advice. It's like, just get in the boat and see where it takes you. See where the rowboat takes you before you try to build a schooner or a sailboat or a yacht. Just get in the boat and see where it takes you. And inevitably, you can never figure it out. You look back and go, oh, that made sense. This happened, this happened, this happened. But you only connect the dots, as Steve Jobs said, looking backwards, not looking forward. So got to get in the boat at some point.
I love that analogy. That's so on point. I didn't know what I was getting into until I got started. I didn't know that the voiceover industry even existed. It was a complete accident. I had a thing I wanted to do, recording my voice, pharmacy continuing education journals. Nobody bought, so I kept going. I was in the boat already. Why not? Let's keep going.
And right, and you told me, I remember you telling me that you were coaching with somebody and you were sort of, no, I want to figure out this, and they were sort of taking you in a different direction. You're like, no, this is, I want to do this, but you had to dig a little further, and it's a deep industry, and as soon as you start digging, man, you realize that it'll you can dig as deep as you want to go. It's giving, it's deep, it's rich, it's fun, it's exciting. There's so many opportunities that present themselves all the time. So it's just a matter of how much energy you want to give to it, to determine how far you're going to go with it.
Good point. Well, speaking of the voiceover industry and having a starting point and ending up somewhere else, when you first started in the voiceover industry, where did you think the industry needed your voice? I mean, what did you want to do?
Like everybody, when they first get started, I wanted to do commercials, right? I mean, that's kind of what draws people in. They think, okay, I'm going to be the next voice of, BMW or Home Depot or whatever. So I think that's where I initially went. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know, but that's when most people think about voiceover. That's what they think about. I think when I started in VO, I didn't even know what e-learning was. I didn't really know what that was. I
Ditto.
I knew people talked. I heard people in my headphones and different places and on the radio and TV, but I didn't really know the depth of what you could do in the voiceover industry. And I just kind of started, and I got my little business cards and my CDs and started reaching out to radio stations and production companies and trying to find my way. But initially, it was always commercials, and I have agents, so I do get commercials, and I have gotten some commercial work, but it hasn't ended up being the majority of what I do. I've gravitated towards audiobooks. I love to read. I love every time I get a new, like, actual book to physically read, I love it. Back when we could go to the library, I would love to go to the library and get a book out, and I would just get absorbed in it and loved every minute of reading. And it's the same way now when I get an audiobook. I'm like, wow, I get to start a new book, and they're usually very interesting, and I get to learn while I'm reading them, and people pay me to do it, and I'm like, this is wonderful. So, it happened that way, and I gravitated toward doing some e-learning and a little bit of commercial work and even a little bit of on-camera work. I kind of evolved and started doing that a little bit, and then the whole podcasting world, which by starting the podcast would led me to get clients that I've helped consulting and partnering with and producing and editing and uploading their podcasts. So I never thought about that. Even when I started my podcast 5 years ago, I never thought that people would pay me money to help them create their podcasts. I just did it because it was some way for me to impart information to other people so that I could share my journey with them. It's that hashtag give first. So I was like, let me just put it out there, put it out there. And I'm learning along with them when I'm interviewing people. So it was a great experience for me to create and build my network. But I couldn't have anticipated what it would lead to. But so initially, when I think back to that green guy that was just, I want to be a voice actor. So now, uh, just in such a different place, but you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere.
Yes, indeed. Now, I looked at your website. I checked out your demos. You have demos for a number of different genres. I'm sure that's only a partial representation of things that you've actually done. I saw IVR, e-learning. I think you had a tab for audiobooks, but not demos. I forget what else you do. I'm sorry.
On-hold
Commercial.
messaging, yep, some commercial on-hold messaging as well. I think I did, yeah, I created some separate ones. In the industry, it's usually you're gonna have a commercial demo and a narration demo, or yeah, a narration demo, they call it these days. So, and I had a really good conversation with the the man who started Edge Studios, David Goldberg, I think is his name, and I met him at FAFCon, and he and I had a nice chat, and he was a guest on the podcast, and he's like, "Yeah, create separate demos. Just think of the things you might want to do, and then create demos for them. Don't get locked into just only having a commercial demo or only having a narration demo. If you want to do e-learning, do an e-learning demo. If you want to do on-hold messaging, do an on-hold messaging demo." So I did. So I started creating different ones. I've got to update them because I've done a lot more work. That the demos in our world they get antiquated fast, because it's a fast moving industry.
Mhm.
And you'll create a demo, even if it's your commercial demo, and 2, 3 years later, you're like, oof, I need to get a new one, but it costs a lot of money to make a demo. So you can
Mhm.
do these little ones, kind of these mini demos, where you can just take some of the work you've done, craft together 2 or 3 samples, and make that available to whoever it is you're reaching out to. Then that's a good marketing tool, because primarily people that want to hire you only want to know 3 things. In my experience, they want to know that um, you can actually do something. So they need to hear your demos, right? They want to say, can he do a car commercial? Can he do a beverage commercial? Can he do a financial institution commercial? Um, they want to have you got to have a little bit of credibility, which is where testimonials come in, and then they need to know how to get a hold of you. I mean, it really is that simple. So give them that. Make it available to them as easily as possible. I have VoiceZam as well, which I use, which splits them up into individual files, so they don't have to listen through all the way through a lengthy MP3 file. They can literally click on each individual track and listen. So I think that helps. When producers are looking you up and listening to your work. So little stuff like that, the marketing piece has been something I focused a lot on over the years, and creating those little mini demos has helped for sure.
Very good. It sounds like you are so busy. You said you're a couple of months booked out for audiobooks, right?
hmm
Do you have time to do other projects too?
hmm Yeah, I do, and I try to. Everybody's different, so I can't really. My voice really can't, unless I have to, do more than 2 finished hours. If I get over 2 finished hours in a day, I feel it. And so I try to keep it somewhere in that 1.5 to 2 hours. So if I do, 10 finished hours, I usually do some work on Saturdays, try to take Sundays off. So if I can get 10 to 12 finished hours in a week, then I'm happy. And so I have to make sure that I keep track of my schedule and my family schedule. We have four of our kids are home, and it's been a little nutty, but we have to arrange
I bet.
everybody, so everybody has to know when Daddy's recording.
Yes.
Um, but as long as I can get those that anywhere from 1.5 to a little over 2 hours in a day, then I'm happy. So if I can get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and get down and start doing that, and usually it's like a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you're doing 2 hours of finished, it's going to take you about 4 hours to record that. So if I can get 4 hours of time in the studio to record, then I'm good. And that gives me time to do other things. Like I have podcast clients that I work with that I help produce their projects for them. I have other clients that have e-learning projects that they send to me, corporate video work. That I have other clients that will send me those things. But they're not, the consistency is the audiobooks. So the audiobooks are kind of like the bread and butter, right? So that's what I do every day. Every day I do audiobooks. And then I can work around that audiobook schedule to fit in time for the podcasting, the e-learning. If I get some on-hold messaging that comes in, or corporate video work that comes in, I can do that around the audiobook. So everything kind of revolves around the audiobook schedule, which is because I have to deliver those, right? I have deadlines on those. So I know I have to get a certain amount done in order to meet the deadline. So that's kind of the way that I work it. And it seems to be working for me right now. I try not to take on more than I can handle. Doesn't always work that way, but I try. I try. I try. And then, you want to balance. They say that, entrepreneurs work 80 hours a week so they don't have to work 40, So it's like we kind of fall into that category sometimes where you're never not working because you're freelancing and you're not working a typical 9 to 5. So when you don't have a typical day, it feels like every day you're working. So I have to really force myself to make sure I stop at a certain time and make sure that I at least take Sundays off to not only rest my voice, but just, re-engage with the things that are not voiceover related, including my family. So that's important.
Absolutely. And you just hit on something I wanted to ask you a question about. Your voice only lasts so long, right? And I'm sure I'm the same too. I get a little bit raspy or the mouth noises start getting in the audio that I'm recording.
Yeah.
How do you care for your voice? Do you do warm-ups? How about products you
Mhm.
use? Anything? What
Mhm.
pointers do you have
Yeah.
for me?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and I learned that the hard way. You've got to, especially if you're recording every day. Um, I used to not warm up. I used to think that just, a little bit of warm up was okay. But then when I would start to record, I would find that around the 20 to 30-minute mark when I was recording, I would start to feel my vocal cords kind of release a little bit and my voice would smooth out. And I
Yeah.
realized that it was around about 20 minutes of time that I needed to get that voice warmed up. But I just want to get down and start recording. A lot of us do. We just want to get to it. But I really began to realize that it was so important to warm up. So I have Rodney Salisbury's tongue twisters and vocal warm ups, and I'll go through this series of those tongue twisters. It'll take me about anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to work through those. And I'll do those before I start to record. I also do this thing that I learned that I didn't really know about it until I don't even remember where I learned it. But when you hum, it relaxes your vocal cords versus speaking, which strains your vocal cords. And I saw this video online of this. They were a singing group. There was a lot of them. Like it was like a chorus, and they were in an auditorium warming up before their performance, and they were all had their mouths closed, and they were mouthing whatever their words were in the song, but with their mouth closed. So it sounded so bizarre, but that's how they warmed up. Because when you hum, it relaxes. So I will hum through the scales, or I'll pick a song and I'll sing it with my mouth closed, so it comes out as a hum. But I'm articulating the words with my mouth closed, and that relaxes my my vocal cords. And I I make sure I drink. Staying hydrated is so important. You wake up, you've gone like 8 to 10 hours without drinking anything. Everybody wakes up dehydrated. I used to tell when I did consultations when I was a pharmacist, it was like telling people one of the most important things they could do for their health was to get hydrated and drink 16 ounces of room temperature water in the morning
Hmm.
and guzzle that. So you're rehydrating, and then drink small amounts consistently throughout the day. Don't wait 2 hours and then guzzle another pint of water. After the only time of the day that it's okay to do that is first thing in the morning to rehydrate, and then make sure you're consistently drinking over the course of the day. And that makes a huge difference. If I haven't done that, I will definitely see a drop off in my vocal performance, and I'll feel it in my throat and my voice, that I'm not hydrated enough. And then once you get to that point, it's too late, right? You can't instantly rehydrate. You have to. It takes time. So staying hydrated makes a huge impact, and trying to get enough sleep. If you're tired, it's gonna come through, for sure. So that's what I do. I really learned the value of making sure that I warmed up before I started to do my work for the day. Definitely.
That's great advice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just started training with Debbie Irwin for medical narration, and she has some glycerin swabs that she recommends. Do you ever use anything like that for mouth noises?
No, I haven't. I pretty much just have my jug of water here that I drink, and I don't. There's a, oh, what's it called? Real Voice. I don't even know if they're still in business, but we used to sell it at the pharmacy. This Real Voice throat spray that
Oh,
I would sometimes use after I had recorded, so that it soothed my throat. Eduardo Ballerini, who is a wonderful, top-notch audiobook narrator and an actor as well. He was a guest on my podcast, and he said that every time he's done recording for the day, he has a little bit of bourbon, believe it or not. And somebody had actually recommended that to him, that it actually does that alcohol soothes those vocal cords after you've recorded. Not a good idea to do it before you record for obvious reasons. So so make sure you do it after you record, but it does help relax your vocal cords And I haven't applied that process yet, but I may take it under consideration.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I didn't see that coming. That's interesting. You never
I
know what other people are gonna do unless you ask.
I
It's kinda
know.
cool to find out.
I was surprised when he told me that. I'm like, "That's interesting." He goes, "Nope, somebody actually told me that it was medically correct to, to do that." Obviously, not that he's advocating you drink alcohol. He's just saying that it actually does something medically to help relax your vocal cords after you've
His
recorded. So,
response has been positive is what you're saying.
seems to be working.
Yes,
Seems
it
to be
works for
working.
him. I'm not laughing at you, Eduardo, if you're listening to this.
Please no. Please no.
Mike, I understand you do some live announcing work. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I've done a little bit, and they were referrals from other voice actors, which is really nice. And I was actually scheduled to do one in around April, early middle, middle to late April, something like that, April 24th, I think. And it was in New York City, and of course with the COVID, the city got shut down, so that was postponed. But those are a lot of fun. They're a little stressful. The one I did most recently was in New York City, and it was a big event for the scientific community. There's a um, I can't think of the name of the actual event. I think it was the Blavatnik Awards for scientific excellence, and this person. Whose last name is Blavatnik is one of the wealthiest people in the world. He's like one of the
Wow.
wealthiest people in England, and he gives money away every year to scientists. It's really, really neat. And and so it's a competition from all over the world. And so they sent me the script, and you can imagine with names from all over the world, they can be a little tricky to pronounce. And so they sent me the phonetic spelling because I had to do some pre-work for them. So there's some things that you record ahead of time just in case something goes wrong, that they have it recorded, which I didn't know until I started doing this. So they'll kind of get you to do a lot of the work ahead of time as just a backup in case you're sick or something goes down, something goes wrong the night of that. They can play this and they can actually have it. So I had to learn those names. And so we get there, and we started rehearsing at like 1 o'clock for a 7 o'clock show. It was fascinating to see the whole way that they produce these actual they run these live shows. And I was up top, way up. They call it the voice of God, so you're up away where nobody can see you, but we could see down and see everything. And I'm sitting next to the showrunner, the woman who's running the show, and she has her headset on, and I have the microphone in front of me. And so she's calling it. What they say is she calls it. So she's like calling the band, or she's calling, okay, presenter one, come to the stage now, and the presenter comes out. And so when she would cue me, she would like give me the thumbs up or point her finger at me, and I knew I had to go. And so we rehearsed and rehearsed most of the day. Right before it's supposed to start, they actually bring these finalists in, and there was at least 20 of them that I had to announce. And they all got up on stage, and we did a run through. And a couple of them were like, that's not how you say my name. So you can imagine if you've learned the phonetic way to say it, right? You said it dozens of times. It's almost showtime. And they're like, oh, that's not how you say my name. You pronounce it this way. It was so crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I've got to completely wipe this out of my hard drive in my brain of this is the way I would say this name, and rewrite it phonetically and practice it enough in my head so that I didn't make a mistake and say it incorrectly because it's live. Right? There isn't a second chance to say their name correctly. So that was
Wow.
nuts. That was stressful, but it was fun. I mean, talk about some adrenaline going. It was so much fun. And fortunately, I stayed overnight, and the hotel was right across the street from the from the museum because I was pretty tired by the time that was all over. You get that adrenaline rush, and then when it's over, you get that crash,
Yes.
as all us pharmacists know that that happens. So it was exciting. I can't wait to do more of it when the world opens up again. But it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. It's not for the faint of heart because there is no second chances. We're used to sitting in a studio or in our home, a recording studio, and we can just click. No, I didn't like that take. No, I didn't like that take. You don't get that with live announcing. You've got to get it right the first time. It's scary.
No pressure.
No,
Not at
piece
all.
of cake. That's where that bourbon might come in handy maybe after that.
Yes, indeed.
Right,
Yes.
calm your nerves a little bit, but anyway, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, as we begin to wrap this up, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about a product that you have on your website that we haven't talked about yet. You have a course. Could you tell me a little bit about your online course?
Yeah, sure. It's VO Success, so you can find it at vosuccess.com. And all this stuff has been just an extension of from where I began. So when I started 15 years ago, I really felt the urge to document my journey and to help others who were kind of coming up behind me. You and I both know Kelly Buttrick, and Kelly's a good friend, and she's a fellow voice actor. She used a great analogy called the compass. She said, as you go through your career, you have those people that are your north, that they're a little bit ahead of you, and they're your mentors or the people you seek out for guidance and advice. And then you've got your east and west, which are your peers. Those are the people that are walking the walk with you, and you're going to learn from them as well and support them as well. And then you've got your south, which are the people that are coming after you. And just like you've reached up and asked for a hand from your north, so too do you need to make sure you reach back and put your hand out for those people that are your south. And I love that analogy, and I've applied it in my own career in my life. Um, and Kelly's a great ambassador for that because she lives it. She lives it. She's been just a great friend, and she's so well respected in the industry. But anyway, so the VO course was an extension of that. I created my ebook and then the podcast just as a way to document the journey and to keep putting resources out there for people. And inevitably, as you kind of progress through your career, people will ask you, well, how do I get started in VO? You and I were talking about that. You get that as well as I do. How do we get started? What do we do? What should I be thinking about? And and I don't mind that. I enjoy getting emails and people reaching out, and I answer all the emails that I get, and I give out as much information as I can based on the time that I have. But I thought to myself, well, if I create a course and keep it relatively inexpensive, I can direct people to it, and it'll help them and provide them some guidance. And it's a course essentially for that is talking about the foundation of what you need to be thinking about to have a successful voiceover career, because everybody's journey is different. So it's not a course that says you do this, this, and this, and you're going to be successful, because nobody can really tell you that. But there are some foundational things you can do to make sure that you have that strong foundation upon which to build your career. Things like make sure you're getting focused, make sure you're getting trained and coached by reputable coaches and training companies. Make sure you understand the business side of it, your branding, your home recording studio. Things like that are kind of foundational things that I talk about in the course, and it's a way for me to continue to be able to provide information that is available because there's only one me. But if I have a course, then people can take it and get that information, and then if they have more specific questions, they can reach out to me. So it's neat because it's a lifetime membership. So when I add things to it, people still get to use it and have access to it. And over time, I keep adding things to it as we go. So it's just a place for me to kind of bring information. As I get information, I can bring it to the course and I can add it to the course so that it's continuing to provide information to those people that take it. So it's been a lot of fun.
Very good. You just brought up branding, and I just wanted to know, how did you develop your brand? Because you have the audiobook section and you do IVR or phone telephony, you do commercials. Do you do everything under the same brand?
Yeah, I made that decision early on that one of the first things that I wanted to do as I really started to pay closer attention, and it really stemmed around the podcast, because I had to create a logo for the podcast. And at the same time, I wanted to create one that could go across all the different platforms. So I worked with a really phenomenal graphic designer who's actually on my podcast team, because I have a website called podcastsnap.com where people can go to find out more information about working with me in the podcast world. Um, and Jenny is part of that team, and she's created all my logos for me, for all my clients, for all the things that I've done in my VO career. So she's fantastic. So she created a really neat. Well, I love the logo that I have, and I can take that and apply that across all of my social media and all of my platforms. So the course, the podcast, my website, all has similar branding. You'll see similar color schemes, and it was important to me to create that continuity. And I really think it's important because, logos aren't going to get you hired. Logos aren't going to get you, make you successful. But there is something to be said for having a consistent brand so that when people do start to reach out and find out more about you, that there is a consistency of what they're getting. You as the provider want to provide consistency across the board so that the people that might hire you or work with you or interact with you kind of know what they're getting. So everything is stemmed from that. And then I have a great web designer as well who's on my team, and she helps me with all my websites. And we just created an audiobook page, which I love. And it's on my website. It's not a standalone site, so it's a page on my website. But when you see the page, it looks like it's a standalone website because she created it. She did such a nice job with it. So there's consistency across the board: podcasts, VO course, website, audiobook page, social media. I've tried to make sure that I present a consistent brand, and I think it's important in the VO industry to have that.
I like your tagline that you have on your website, and I think it's on your narrator profile on ACX too. Do you want to share that with my audience?
Is that the one that Sean came up with for me? That audiobook one?
Did Sean come up with it, or was it homework for Sean's class?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't remember. Hold on. I think that Sean encouraged us, to come up with our own little tagline. And the I don't remember what are the three words? I know the end of the tagline, but it was like truthful, I think intelligent. I don't remember what they are, but you can tell. Do you have it up
I
there?
do. I have it because ours were really similar: confident, engaging, and trustworthy. Those were your three adjectives. But what was the last half?
Like a cool college professor, which my wife hates, by the way.
Really? Oh, I love it. It fits so much.
I know. Sean's like, oh, you got it. You got to go with that. I'm like, all right, I'm going to trust you on this one. Yeah. I don't know. Diana, my wife doesn't like, I don't know why, whether she doesn't think college professors are cool. I don't know. But I think it kind of works.
You've got the glasses, and I think in your graduation picture that Sean put up on LinkedIn, I think you're wearing the tweed blazer with the elbow patches. I mean, you just embody
Could
it.
be. I don't. Yeah. That's what he said. He goes, you got the glasses with the, I don't know what they call this stuff. Is it tortoise shell or something?
I think so.
Is that what it is? They got a little stubble going on, and he's like, yo, no, you're like a college professor, but you're cool, and you got that, you got that. That's what I think. You got to go with it. I'm like, all right, but I like it. It's catchy. People remember it.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of what you sound like. Here's the thing: you want your brand to represent you when you're not in the room, right? Isn't that what a brand's supposed to be? It's what people say about you when you're not in the room, and people can point to your logo and that vocal profile that you've kind of got going on there: confident, engaging, and trustworthy, like a cool college professor. They know what they're getting before they even meet you. You get it in their head.
What's yours?
Confident, calm, and trustworthy, like a big sister you actually want to listen to.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it.
That's my audiobook brand. Yes, because I have a very young vocal profile.
We've got similar descriptive words. That's awesome. That makes sense.
Yes.
I think it fits perfect.
Oh, well, thank you.
That's great. That's great.
That was fun creating that. And it's been fun talking to you today. Thank you, Mike, so much for being on the Pharmacist Voice podcast. This has been fantastic. A lot of fun talking and catching up with you.
It has been my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, Kim.
Thank you for joining me for episode 41 of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Visit thepharmacistvoice.com to subscribe and read the show notes.